25 minutes before 1 o'clock. This is Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. Steve Rukavina in for Sean Appel for the rest of this week. Well, the construction holiday is over. Some of you returned home this weekend from holidays. I hope that your return wasn't to a scene like this.
In the living room, there was a lamp turned over. The pillows on the sofa were all over the floor. There was a bar of soap. There was scattered wrappings of chocolate. The wooden blinds had been completely shredded, and there were wooden slats all over the floor. It was a mess.
That's Miriam Powell. She lives in NDG, and that was the scene when she arrived home from her holidays last weekend. She was the victim of a home invasion of sorts.
So I charged upstairs to see if my computer was okay, and that's where I saw in my study a flash of gray squirrel by the window. So then I closed the doors of the bedroom and bathroom, dashed downstairs, almost collided into my husband. I said, "There's a squirrel in the house."
It was indeed a squirrel, and eventually, with the help of an exterminator, Miriam and her family were able to chase the squirrel out of the house, but she left behind a litter of babies that didn't make it, which caused quite an unpleasant mess. But I'm sure everyone has heard a story like this before, or maybe it's happened to you. And we want to hear your stories now of animal encounters, whether they be in your house or somewhere else. I know once my brother, when he lived in university in a student house in Kingston, came home to find a squirrel holding the Cheerio box in its little paws and plucking the Cheerios out and eating it on the kitchen table. So there's always stories like this. And we are going to talk in just a moment to an animal expert who could tell you how to prevent things like this. But if you have questions as well, if you're worried about something at your house or how to sort of animal-proof your house, feel free to call in with your questions. You can give us a call right now. The number's again, 514-597-4500. Toll-free across Quebec, 877-597-4500. Or text us at 22CBC with your animal encounters. Chris Grabas deals with problems like Miriam's every day. He's an animal control expert at Skedaddle Wildlife Control in Montreal, and he is with us now. And as I mentioned, if you have a question for him about your house, give us a ring. Chris, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Steve.
So I know you were talking on the radio this morning about this, but I'll just ask you again, what do you make of it when you hear a story like Miriam's there?
Well, you know what, it's not surprising. I hear this every day. There's always at least one or two cases on the island of Montreal that have a little home invasion by either a squirrel or a bird, typically getting into a chimney, like in Miriam's case. And these areas all have to, like we always strongly recommend, having them screened off professionally so that, you won't have a home invasion when you don't expect it.
Aside from chimney, what are some other problem areas where animals either settle or get into a house?
There's quite a few actually on a house. Typical homes have roof vents, wall vents, plumbing vents where animals can get into. Anything that vents to the exterior of the home can be a possible entry point for any animal. But also it depends on the structure of the home. Structures are all different, and you can have different items on a house that can be susceptible to wildlife entry.
All right, we'll ask you more about how to prevent some of that in just a moment. We are talking about your animal encounters and what you can do to keep animals out of your house. If you have a question for Chris Grabas, you can give us a call. Or if you just want to tell us a story about your experience with animals, 514-597-4500. Toll free across Quebec, 877-597-4500. Or text us at 22CBC. Let's go to Richard now on the line from Beaconsfield. Richard, good afternoon. Richard, can you hear me okay?
Okay. Good afternoon.
Richard, can I ask you to just turn down your radio maybe?
It's off.
Okay, sorry about that. What did you want to tell? Do you have a story of an animal encounter?
Well, not exactly a story. We have 6 giant raccoons coming up on our deck every night, chasing our cats around.
Okay.
And wondering what we can do to them.
Chris?
Sue them and take them to Texas, maybe.
Hold the line there, Richard, and we'll ask our expert, Chris Grabas, about that. Chris, what do you think?
Well, raccoons are very common in the suburbs. There's usually, in any square kilometer, you have anywhere between 22 to 25 raccoons. And all of them usually have a typical routine. And they're probably coming to your deck just because somebody probably has got them to a routine of being fed, sometimes eating cat food, because people leave cat food out on their deck, or dog food, and the raccoons pick up on this very quickly. If I don't know, if you do have cats and you're feeding them on the outside and leaving the bowls outside, the raccoons will definitely come and eat everything up during the night.
Uh-huh.
So if you want to deter that, what is the best thing to do, Chris? Just stop leaving the food out? Will that work, or will they keep coming?
Stop leaving your food out. Your garbages, very important to leave them indoors. Take them out on garbage day, because this is a very big raccoon attractant and skunk attractant. People who have basically bird feeders, very important to, make sure you have proper covers on them and just for the birds, because all the seeds drop down. You're going to get squirrels coming there. You got to get little mice and everything, and all these animals can have to eventually make their way into your home.
Richard, I hope that helps you. I guess you could try lassoing them, but I think it's probably not going to work.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for the call.
Bye.
We want to hear your stories of animal encounters, or if you have a question for our expert, Chris Grabas with Skedaddle Wildlife Control in Montreal, give us a call, 514-597-4500, toll free across Quebec, 877-597-4500. Vittorio is on the line from Sutton. Vittorio, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you have a thought or a question?
Yeah, I have a story, and then I have a very fast question.
Okay.
With an answer. I was living in Sénéville. I was coming home late at night with the family, 2 children in the car, and in front of the house there were at least 4 or 5 raccoons. So I told my children to stay in the car and my wife, and I opened the door, and I said, if I go in the fridge, I find some food, I give it to the raccoons, I distract them, and then we go in the house. When I was in the kitchen, I opened the fridge door, and I heard the noise, and the raccoon was right there at my feet. And I gave him a hard-boiled egg or a soft-boiled egg. He put it, he grabbed it with one end, and then it hopped on the 3 legs. He left, and all the others followed.
So you sort of lured them away by giving them food?
Yeah, but the amazing thing was that he followed me in the house, and he stood beside me like a pet dog, looking for food. And then I have another story that maybe would help your listener. When I renovated a new home in Sutton, I came home to find out that in front of the 4 entrance doors of the duplex, cats were urinating. And apparently they do every time a new home is built or renovated. They make a landmark on your carpet at the entrance, at the doormat. And I try everything. I ask experts. Nothing worked. I couldn't get rid of that stench, which is terrible. So one day I decided to use my urine and dispose it exactly in the same spot. They never came back.
Okay, so you sort of beat them at their own game, so to speak, Vittorio?
I created my own territory, and this could be a help to everybody. I heard so many people complaining of the same situation, and this is a foolproof remedy, I can assure you. It worked.
All right, well, thanks for sharing it. Did you have a question as well for Chris Grabas?
No, that was the question answered. I wanted to help with my own contribution about nonsense animals,
All right, Vittorio, thanks very much for the call.
Have a good day. Bye.
Chris, I don't know if you would second Vittorio's recommendation on that one.
Yeah, it could be quite a long process if you want to keep doing that, because I've heard of people trying different things, and you hear stories of mothballs, cayenne pepper. These things are all temporary solutions. They might work temporarily, but the thing is, you must keep always putting it out all the time. And some animals aren't deterred by it, because you got to think about it. Some of these animals live in garbage. Why would mothballs deter them when they actually smell better, probably, than garbage? There's also urine. Yes, urine can work in some cases, but you have to also remember that animals have predators. So if you are, let's say, using, fox or coyote urine to deter raccoons or skunks, it might work as long as these animals know what the scent of their predator is. Urban raccoons don't have predators. So you put out coyote urine or whatnot, it may not work. In the case where it does work, you still have to consistently put it out, just like these canines consistently mark their territory. And it might work in that case, but there's no guarantee.
All right. We are talking about animal encounters and how to animal-proof your home if you need to, if you have critters that have settled in a place that you'd rather they were not. We'd love to hear your stories, your creative solutions, such as Vittorio had there, or if you have a question for Chris Grabas, who's an animal control expert who's with us from Skedaddle Wildlife Control, you can give us a call, 514-597-4500, toll-free across Quebec, 877-597-4500, or you can text us at 22CBC. Chris, the story we heard earlier from Miriam seemed like a pretty extreme example of damage caused in a house. Do you have some other examples of the worst cases maybe you've seen of damage that animals have caused?
A few years ago when I started on the job here in Montreal, we got an emergency call for a customer out in the South Shore in Brossard who had a skunk enter his basement. And typically skunks don't get into people's homes unless obviously you leave a door open or something. But what happened in this case was a garage door was left open by accident. Customer saw the skunk go in, closed the garage door, just thinking radically, and the skunk somehow got in between the wall and fell down into a little crawl space in the basement. Customer gives us a call to come out and remove the skunk, where typically it never happened before that skunk got into a basement. So he wanted it removed immediately. And we were trying to think of a solution where we can remove it without the skunk spraying, the walls of the house or anything like that. So
yeah, that's the tricky part, right?
That's the tricky part. Well, we did think of a solution, and it was possibly going to work, where we were going to install a little live trap where we can catch the skunk and put the garbage bag over top of it, so that because the garbage bag can actually control the scent, so it stays within the bag itself.
Okay. And
it would go in, and then after we remove it. But he didn't want that. He wanted it removed immediately. So we met his demands, and we removed it physically right away and let it go out on the property. So we took it, by hand, took it out. Unfortunately, it did spray. This house, just basically to let you know, this house was probably put for sale next week.
The spray is that pervasive. You can't get rid of it, I guess.
It is so pungent, and I can tell you that you cannot keep your eyes open, and you have trouble breathing when it sprays directly in the vicinity of you. It doesn't have to spray you directly. Just in the vicinity, it is so strong that your senses are completely blocked.
And I know we hear stories, if you get sprayed, you take a bath in tomato juice, but I imagine you couldn't wash out your whole basement with tomato juice, right?
That's an old wives' tale as well. That's where you have to actually renovate the whole house. The gyprock has to be changed and everything. But there is an easier solution for the people who ever get sprayed with skunks or their dogs do. It's basically a small mixture of hydrogen peroxide mixed with water, dishwasher soap, and baking soda. Mm-hmm. And the proper portions will actually get rid of the scent right away. You can actually wash your clothes in it without having them bleached or anything as well, too.
Oh,
and the scent goes away immediately.
That's a good one to know as well. We're talking with Chris Grabas. He is an animal control expert at Skedaddle Wildlife Control in Montreal. If you have a question for him, if you have critters on your property that you don't want or are causing some problems, you can give us a call, 514-597-4500. Toll free across Quebec, 877-597-4500, or text us at 22CBC. One listener writes in to say, I live in an area full of skunks and groundhogs, but the smell of my dogs keeps them off our property. They only bother our neighbors. Chris, here's a question from the text message line. What can you do with groundhogs living under your shed and eating your neighbor's garden?
Okay. For the garden, it's kind of hard to control. We can protect the shed itself, where we actually would have to trench out the whole perimeter of the shed and install screen in a specific way where the animals are not able to get back underneath and dig under our screen. And then they wouldn't be able to go back under the shed and would be forced to move to one of their alternate den sites.
All right, not bad. Let's go back to the phones now. We have Lena on the line from Morin Heights. Lena, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead with your story.
A couple of points. First off, I'm a biologist, and it's illegal to move wildlife according to the Quebec Ministry of the Environment. You're supposed to use as many means possible to deter wildlife, but as a last resort, you can engage a company such as your consultant. I've had, in the past, I've had gray squirrels, baby gray squirrels with their eyes not yet opened appear in the garden. I presume the mother was killed. Make a long story short, we raised them and then released them in a wild area. Same thing happened. I had a red squirrel come into the house and have a nest of babies, and one of them actually fell out of the insulation, and unfortunately my dog killed it, and the other ones we raised and then released into the wild. My brother had a problem with woodchucks under his shed, and my dog went in the backyard and urinated around it, and the woodchuck left. A couple of years later, another woodchuck came back, and I suggested to my brother to urinate around the opening, and that worked, and the woodchuck left. And that's in the city. Many wild animals, despite the fact that they may not have contact with coyotes or wolves, will still respond to urine, but perhaps not in all cases. So you certainly have to give that a try and see if it works. And with respect to attracting birds, you shouldn't really put out a bird feeder in the summer, because once the insects are out, the birds have plenty of food. So you can deter raccoons and skunks by not putting out a bird feeder in the summer, or potentially putting a tray underneath to catch the seed so it doesn't fall to the ground.
All right, Lena, some good tips there. Thanks very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
We're talking about animal encounters today on Radio Noon and how to animal-proof your home and your property. We have Chris Grabas with us. He is an expert, trained human animal control expert at Skedaddle Wildlife Control in Montreal. So if you have a question for him, or if you just want to share a story, you can give us a call, 514-597-4500, toll-free across the province, 877-597-4500. Howard is on the line from NDG. Howard, good afternoon.
Salut.
How are you?
I'm just fine. How are you?
Good. Do you have a story for us?
Yes, I do. I have a story about a mouse.
Okay.
I was living with my late fiancée, Laura, on Avonmore, and she said, there's a mouse in the kitchen on the stove. I went into the kitchen, and there was a mouse at the back of the stove between the burners. So I pulled my sleeve up to the base of my palm to sort of protect my arm, and pressed my forearm against the front of the stove, and somehow the mouse knew what I wanted him to do and trusted me. He walked between the burners to the front of the stove, stood on my arm, I lifted him up, carried him outside onto the lawn, and let him go free. I thought that was a great story.
Yeah, you're like a mouse whisperer or something, Howard.
Well, he trusted me.
Okay, thanks for the story. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Salut.
Chris Grabas, what do you make of that story? Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah, it's a common thing. I just want to touch on a couple of points, especially Lena. Lena has some very good points there regarding the Ministry of Natural Resources and Wildlife, which we completely respect, and we are aware of that we're not allowed relocating or trapping animals, because we do not do that. Our company is completely humane. We take animals out of people's homes, and they're released on site, so they're still in their home territory. We use what we call one-way doors on the entry areas, which release the animals out, and then they can't go back in. Hence, they're forced themselves to move away. We don't move any animals or take them in our trucks. Also, she mentioned something about bird feeders, which is very important. She said that the insects are all out in the summer, so the birds can eat. But people have to remember, there are insect-eating birds and there are seed-eating birds. The seed-eating birds still need to eat the seeds. They don't eat the insects. As far as Howard is concerned, regarding mice, most homes in Montreal, believe it or not, have mice. Okay, a mouse needs a hole the size of a dime, maybe just a little smaller even, to get into your home. And it all depends on the structure of the home, how well sealed it is. All the cracks and crevices around the house have to be sealed in order not to allow mice in. And if there are mice in the house, we will be happy to come out and get rid of them for you, in the sense that we also will seal up your entire house, put on these one-way doors. We'll get the mice out, but it won't allow them to get back in. And there's another number of other factors that come into play, whether you're living in a semi-detached house, whether you're living in a row unit house, big apartment building. So these are all factors that come into play, because not only can the mice get in sometimes through your home, but they could get into your neighbor's house and access your house as well.
Yeah, I had a problem with mice when I lived at a triplex before, and I was on the third floor. It wasn't clear where they were coming from. They were coming under the kitchen sink, so you had to use a very fine wire mesh in order to cover off all the possible little nooks and crannies there, because as you said, they can squeeze through a hole the size of a dime.
Exactly.
Let's go. Go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead, Chris.
We not only do we use screen, but we use actually a wildlife exclusion sealant, a special made silicone that's used to keep rodents, birds, and bats out of people's homes. And it has a certain product that's in it which deters them from actually chewing it compared to other silicones.
All right, we're going to go back to the phones because we have a lot of calls. Selma is on the line from Laval. Selma, good afternoon.
Hi there.
Go ahead. Do you have a story or a question?
Well, it's kind of a story. We have this property that's behind us. It was sort of a summer cabin by Rivière des Mille, and it seems to have been somewhat abandoned. We've kind of been in touch with the neighbors, but they've left it in such a state that in the winter it often gets sort of overcome by raccoons. Mm-hmm. And so we just wanted to know what our rights were, as neighbors. Like, we obviously don't want to see the raccoons hurt or anything, but, it's also dangerous because there's a big family of raccoons living in the house, next to our yard. And we just wanted to know if you had any suggestions as to how to go about it. And
good question, Selma. Let's put it to Chris. Chris, what do you make of that?
Well, are the raccoons entering the home? Literally,
yeah, we see them sort of coming out of the chimney, or there was at one point an entry for them. We couldn't see it, but we see them sort of playing on the roof and stuff. It's quite scary, actually.
Yeah, no, I could understand. It's literally sometimes raccoons sound like people, like a person's walking in your attic because it's so quiet at night. It can be really scary at times, and what you would need in this case is a wildlife control expert to come out and assess your property and find out how the raccoons are getting in, what can be done. Certain areas, like I said, chimneys, roof vents. Yeah.
But I guess, Chris, it's the neighbor's property is the challenge that she faces here. It's
we look out our back window and we sort of see this in the winter, this whole sort of raccoon infestation of the neighbor's yard. So we don't know, we've called the city and mentioned it to them, but they're like, oh, well, you kind of have to deal with the neighbor directly. And we've mentioned it. And
unfortunately, this is where you have to speak with the neighbors regarding the situation. And, they would have to basically have someone out there to come deal with it, because you can't force someone to do something they don't want to do on their property. And even though they have a wildlife issue, it's completely up to them. It's a more internal thing than it is external.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Selma, thanks for the call, though. I hope that is helpful for you, although it sounds like you have to work it out with your neighbors. Chris Grabas, want to thank you for being with us today.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate it. Chris Grabas is an animal control expert with a company called Skedaddle Wildlife Control in Montreal. Thanks very much for your calls today. Steve Rukavina in for Sean Appel for the rest of the week. Join us again tomorrow right here on Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1.